Well, here we are again, another month gone by, and I get to welcome you to another edition of Lab Manager Academy webinars presented by Lab Manager Magazine. My name is Jeff Tobe, and after an exhausting election night here in the U.S., I just want to say, can't we all be friends? Enough said. So, many of you are loyal participants, and I hope you're still getting as much or more out of these webinars as when we first started almost 3 years ago. As we compile our webinar offering for 2013, please let us know if there are any topics you would like to see addressed in upcoming sessions. We want to make sure that you're getting what you need out of these webinars. And thank you to those of you who emailed me after last month's session, and we're taking everything into consideration. Just email me directly at jeff@jefftobe.com. That's Jeff, J-E-F-F, at jefftobe, J-E-F-F-T-O-B-E.com. Before we go any further, it's always my pleasure to introduce our gracious and generous sponsor, Fran Ebert of Unity Lab Services. Fran?
Thanks, Jeff. We're proud to be a sponsor of such a valuable educational webinar series for lab managers, and we hope that anybody who is still recovering from Hurricane Sandy is doing well. I know I'm on the East Coast, and we're expecting a bit of a storm today, so wishes that goes as good as possible. So those of you who have attended previous webinars have heard me talk about our new service brand, Unity Lab Services, developed specifically to provide solutions that maximize your lab workflow. In addition to service level offerings that are pretty common, such as support plans, training, parts, and accessories, we do offer a full suite of enterprise service product lines offered at the lab, site, or enterprise level. You can see that on your screen. We do provide service solutions for all equipment in a lab, regardless of manufacturer, to provide service solutions without boundaries. As you can see, these services are consulting services, supply management services, asset management services, and scientific support services. We offer these because we recognize that lab managers are asked to balance a wide variety of activities to achieve the best results within a lab. Our vision is a lab where your teams are enabled to work on top priorities and non-core work is streamlined. Our solutions can enable your lab to leverage our best practices and processes developed from over 100 years of combined experience serving thousands of labs. We can help you streamline your supply management, where our teams set up and manage well-stocked, well-organized supply rooms located close to point of use. And of course, we can streamline instrument and equipment service management, so that with just one call, you can request service on any instrument or equipment, regardless of manufacturer, and let our team handle the scheduling, following up, and the on-site hosting of a service provider. In addition, I'm very pleased to highlight to you today our newest enterprise service product, Smart Capture Asset Utilization Monitoring. Smart Capture is a combination of software and service expertise that provides laboratory business intelligence for smarter decisions. For the first time, you can make decisions based on actual equipment usage data from all makes and models of lab instrumentation and equipment. This information provides you knowledge to make informed decisions, balance instrument workload, identify redeployment opportunities, and optimize instrument and equipment service levels. All of this, of course, enables you to reduce your downtime risk, cut capital expenditures, and decrease equipment maintenance costs. We'd enjoy talking with you about how Smart Capture can drive cost savings, improve your lab's productivity, and power smart lab decisions. To learn more about Smart Capture or any of our services, please visit unitylabservices.com, and please enjoy today's webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Fran. And of course, all our thoughts are with everybody on the East Coast. I hope you all consider Unity Lab enterprise services for your lab. They are the reason we're able to bring you some of the top thought leaders in the world on a monthly basis. So thanks so much. Today's webinar is the power of teams to grow your laboratory business. And once again, we've outdone ourselves with over 850 registrants. Before I introduce our presenter, please know that Merge welcomes your questions throughout her presentation. Many of you know the drill, and I hate to be repetitive, but those joining us for the first time, just type in your query in the chat box, and we'll try to get to it during our short time together. Also, I want to let you know that to make sure that everyone has access to this webinar after the fact, every webinar is posted up on the web about one week after airing, so you can get the entire presentation if you like. You need to write down this web address for today's webinar. It's www.labmanager.com. labmanager.com/teambuilding. Again, www.labmanager.com/teambuilding, or just go to the labmanager.com website and click on webcasts and podcasts to get to all the presentations. Also, stay tuned next month when we plan to introduce a new product, a 10 DVD set of the top 10 webinars from the past 3 years. So let's get on with the reason you're here. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, and thanks so much for being with us, Merge Gupta-Sunderji. She turns managers into leaders. A professional speaker, author, and radio commentator, Merge gives people specific and practical tools to achieve leadership and communication success. Over 55,000 managers in 8 countries have attended her fun, content-rich keynotes and facilitated workshops. A leader at one of Canada's premier oil and gas companies for over 14 years and a board leader at a credit union for 3, she offers a unique blend of realism and humor that consistently engages and entertains her audiences. She's an award-winning published author of over 70 articles in numerous magazines, over 19 audio CDs, and 1 book. She is currently working on a new series of audio CDs, as well as her second book, a practical, hands-on, how-to guide titled Power Tools for Leaders. Welcome, Merge.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks, Fran, for sponsoring this learning event. Everyone, if you're in a position of formal or informal leadership, then you know that your success and the success of your lab is dependent on what other people accomplish and achieve. After all, there is no way that you can do it all. So you have to rely on other people to get things done, which means that all your team members must have the direction and the tools they need to get things accomplished, and that you need to be supportive and help iron out problems when they arise. And oh yes, all the while hoping that everyone gets along well with one another. See, high-performing teams can accomplish great things. But the opposite is also unfortunately true. Dysfunctional teams can suck the lifeblood out of you and your organization. So what does it take to create high-performing teams? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. It is possible to create a lab that will build and nurture high-performing teams. And over about the next 45 to 50 minutes together, I'm going to cover 3 areas with you. First, I'm going to give you some background information, knowledge about what the research tells us, to set the stage for you to create high-performing teams in your lab. Second, I'm going to outline the 8 definitive characteristics that define high-performing teams. And finally, last but certainly not least, I'm going to give you 8 powerful and essential tools to harness the synergy of teams to help you grow your lab. Now, before we go any further, I just want to remind you again about your opportunities to ask questions as we continue through this webcast. Please, as we go through the webcast, ask questions of me and talk to Jeff and I. All you have to do is type in your question and click the submit button. And throughout today's webcast, we're going to be monitoring this box, and I will attempt to answer as many of your questions as I can. It's very easy to do, so I want you to be sure to send me your questions as we progress today. Just a few moments ago, I talked about harnessing the synergy of teams to grow your organization. So let's start by talking about what synergy means. Very often, synergy is referred to as 1 + 1 = 3. Now, that's not fancy accounting, nor is it fancy math. It actually makes a lot of sense. And let me explain by reminding you of a classic Aesop's fable about a father whose sons were always fighting. In order to show them the value of working together, the father had one of the sons bring him a bundle of sticks. He gathered his sons around him, and one at a time he asked each young man to take the bundle of sticks and try to break it. None succeeded. He then split open the bundle and handed each son 1 or 2 sticks, asking them once again to try and break them. This time, of course, the sons did so easily. You see, boys, he said, individually these sticks don't have much strength, but when you combine their individual might, they form something of much greater power. Separately you can be broken, but together you are stronger. Now this ageless fable carries a solid message for today's workplace. In your lab, you have people who are responsible for different tasks. There is no doubt that individually, each one of these persons' roles is important. But the real power comes when you can get everyone in the lab to work in synergy, to combine their individual skills and strengths to form a single cohesive unit that is greater than the sum of its individual parts. Teams can accomplish far more than individuals, but you have to find a way to make your team work together. And as some of you might know, unfortunately firsthand, dysfunctional teams can also suck the energy out of any organization, and if you're the team leader, out of you. So the big question is, how do you get people to work together in harmony and towards the greater good, while also allowing them to grow as individuals? So what I'd like to do is start us off by running a quick polling question. Jeff, could you help, please?
Yes, if I can get the technology down right, I will. There we go. So we've got a question up on the screen. Would you say your workplace team is synergetic, dysfunctional? Depends on the day and the time. So just choose your answer, everyone. And Merge, you can...
Okay, so what I'll do is while we're waiting for those results of this poll to come in, I want to remind you again that it is possible to create high-performing work teams. And synergy is simply a visible manifestation of a group of people who are able to work in harmony towards the greater good while also permitting themselves to grow as individuals. And I just want to underline that again. They're working in harmony towards the greater good while also permitting themselves to grow as individuals. So it's not helping the team grow at the expense of yourself. It's helping the team grow as well as yourself. Okay, Jeff, can you give us the results for our polling question, please?
Absolutely. Heavily weighted. Synergistic, we've got 20%. Dysfunctional, we've got 10%. Depends on the day and the time, 70%.
Okay, well, that's great. And the good news is it's kind of what I expected. Most people do say, the vast majority of people often tell me it depends upon the day and the time. And the one thing I didn't put in there, and it also depends on the people, but we're, of course, going to get into that a lot bit more. Now, I am going to be giving you some very specific ideas. I promised you that. But before I go there, let me take you back to a now classic 1968 study that was conducted by Robert Rosenthal, a Harvard University professor, and Lenore Jacobson, a principal at a San Francisco elementary school. Now, at the time, remember 1968, this was a revolutionary experiment. At the beginning of the school year, Robert Rosenthal and his researchers gave an intelligence test to all the students at the elementary school where Lenore Jacobson was the principal. And on the basis of these scores, they identified the top 20% of the students. And these top 20% were identified individually to their teachers as those who showed unusual potential for intellectual growth and could be expected to bloom in their academic performance by the end of the year. That's what they told the teachers. These are the top 20% students. These are the ones who show unusual potential for intellectual growth and can be expected to bloom in their academic performance by the end of the year. But in reality, these 20%, they were not the top students. They were just randomly selected without any reference to their test scores whatsoever. But of course, they told the teachers that these were the top 20%. Now, 10 months later, at the end of the academic school year, the researchers came back and retested all the students. Interestingly enough, those children that had been labeled as intelligent showed significantly greater increase in the new tests than the other children who had not been singled out for the teacher's attention. Let me give you the numbers. On average, the experimental children showed IQ gains of 2 points in verbal ability, 7 points in reasoning ability, and 4 points in overall IQ. In other words, the change in the teacher's expectations regarding the intellectual performance of these allegedly special children had led to an actual change in the intellectual performance of these randomly selected children. Now, this was a groundbreaking experiment in 1968, and Rosenthal explained the results in terms of the teacher's expectations. And as a result, he identified 4 factors that drove this. The first factor is the climate factor. Teachers who expect more of certain students tend to create a warmer climate for those children, both verbally and non-verbally. For example, they will smile more at them. The second factor is the input factor. Teachers will tend to teach more material to children they think are smarter. Response opportunity factor is the third one. Children who are expected to bloom academically get more chance to respond. And finally, there's a feedback factor. If more is expected of a child, he or she gets praised more when he or she is right, but gets more differentiated feedback when he makes a mistake. Children who are not expected to perform get less feedback when they are wrong, because teachers would seem to think that the children in question would not understand the correction, and so teachers spend less time trying to correct them. Now, this landmark study spawned a great deal of further research, all of which since then has confirmed what is referred to today as the theory of expectations. The theory of expectations is that expectations yield results, not just in an academic environment, which is where the original experiment took place, but also in the workplace, which of course is why it matters to us. See, you will often also hear this, Rosenthal factors, referred to as the self-fulfilling prophecy or the Pygmalion effect. And the latter, the Pygmalion effect, is a reference to George Bernard Shaw's famous play in which a professor's high expectations radically transformed the educational performance of a lower-class girl. So this might be interesting, but you might be asking, what does this mean in your lab? Well, high expectations lead to higher performance. Low expectations lead to lower performance. So your expectations of your team members will contribute greatly to their actual performance. In other words, some people get the performance they expect and either consciously or unconsciously adopt behaviors which may drive success for some but also failure in others. Simply put, seriously question your preconceived notions about team members. Be alert to how you behave towards all team members in terms of the climate you establish, the input you give to each team member, the response you give to each person in terms of support and coaching, and how you give differentiated feedback to all. If you truly believe in teamwork and how 1 + 1 = 3, so synergy, then you need to focus on how you can get more from all your employees through higher and more positive expectations focused on all your team members. In my leadership development practice, I have had the privilege of working with over 230 organizations, and within those organizations, multiple teams. So I've had the chance, very fortunately, to observe many, many workplace teams, both good and bad, both synergistic and dysfunctional. And over the years, I have identified 8 characteristics that repeatedly and consistently are present in high-performing workplace teams. I have also observed that most, if not all, of these characteristics are absent in dysfunctional teams. So I want to give them to you. Here are the 8 characteristics. Number 1, high-performing teams develop goals and plans, both individually and jointly. They develop these goals and plans together, and as a result, they achieve buy-in. They achieve commitment. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those just a little bit later. Number 2, high-performing teams respect differences. Differences in viewpoints, opinions, thought patterns, and working habits. Differences in ethnicity, backgrounds, and culture. They respect differences. Number 3, high-performing teams communicate openly and honestly with one another. They've developed a level of openness and trust that allows them to respectfully say what's on their mind without the risk of ridicule from others. They've worked hard to develop active listening skills so that the communication is two-way. Number 4, high-performing teams acknowledge and manage conflict. They know that conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. And perhaps more importantly, they've developed strategies to address and deal with the conflict. Number 5, high-performing teams have the willingness and authority to solve problems. They make decisions and take timely action. In other words, they have the confidence in themselves and in their decisions. Number 6, high-performing teams conduct and participate. High-performing teams are inclusive. They involve all their members. Team members all feel like they belong. No one feels left out. Remember the kid who was always picked last for dodgeball? Well, these team members don't feel that way. I just realized I missed number 5. Number 5 is high-performing teams have the willingness and authority to solve problems. They make decisions and take timely action. In other words, they have the confidence in themselves and in their decisions. That's number 5. Number 6 is they are inclusive. They involve all their team members. Number 7, they believe that they have numerous opportunities for advancement. None of them feel like they're in a dead-end job. They're all positive about their opportunities and their future. And finally, number 8, they have the willingness and the authority to solve problems. They make decisions and they take timely action. They feel like they're part of the team. They feel like they have the authority and they're able and capable to make decisions. So there they are, the 8 characteristics of high-performing teams. These are the 8 characteristics or best practices that I have consistently and repeatedly observed in high-performing teams. So if you want your lab to run as a high-performing team, then this is what you should be striving towards. But the question that's got to be in your mind is, how exactly should you get there? Well, let me give you 8 essential and powerful tools that will help you harness the synergy of teams to help you grow your lab. Team building tool number 1. Create a vision and a sense of purpose. A vision and a sense of purpose is a reason for being. It's why the team exists. It's their motivation for existence. And the best way I have of explaining this further is to give you an example. So I'm going to use myself for this example. Now, I'm a professional speaker. This is what I do. I travel to over 100 different cities across Canada and the United States every year, delivering keynotes and seminars to associations and corporations. Because I travel so much, I spend a lot of time in airports. I spend a lot of time in airports usually waiting. And I'm often waiting because I've missed a connection. In fact, I've usually run madly down from one end of the concourse to the other, only to discover that my flight has just left. And as I sit there waiting in airports for my flight to arrive, the next flight to come, I've had the opportunity to observe many people. And I've discovered that there are a lot of cranky people in airports nowadays, both cranky passengers and cranky gate agents. And as the day goes on, I find that I get pretty cranky too. Eventually, I'll make my way to my destination, arrive at the hotel, only to discover that they've given away my confirmed room. Then I have to stand and argue with the desk clerk, and in the end, in due course, I'll finally get a place to sleep. If I'm lucky, room service is still open, and I can order a meal, which is always tasteless and always cold. And by the way, the bed is always too hard or too soft, and the room is always too hot or too cold. Who would like my job? Now, I'm almost 100% certain that most of you, after this description, would definitely not want to do what I do. And the sad truth is that this description I just gave you is absolutely true. But I'd like to give you another description of what I do. I'm a professional speaker. I travel to over 100 different cities across Canada and the United States every year, delivering keynotes and seminars to associations and corporations. I give people specific and practical tools to help them communicate and work more effectively with their staff and colleagues. Because of what I do, people are able to go back to their workplaces and create positive and productive work environments. And that's exciting and amazing. But you know what I do? It goes even farther. The tools that I give to people, they are able to take back to their workplaces and not only use them, but also teach them to the other people that they work with. And then those people are able to create positive and productive work environments. See, what I do doesn't just go to one degree. What I actually do is create a wave of positivity and productivity that ripples and spreads in organizations across the country. Who would like my job now? I am willing to bet that a lot more of you are interested in my job after this description as compared to the first description. Oh, and by the way, this second description, also 100% true. You see, here's the thing. The first description makes up the crappy stuff in my job. And let's face it, every job has crappy stuff. But the second description, it's my reason for being. It's my sense of purpose. It's my vision. If all I had was the crappy stuff, then I'd have stopped being a professional speaker a long time ago. But the second description makes the first description worthwhile. My sense of purpose and my vision allow me to overlook the myriad of frustrations that happen day to day in what I do. And so it's up to you to help your team understand their vision and sense of purpose, because if you don't, all they'll see is the crappy stuff. And if all they see is the crappy stuff, then they are not going to be a high-performing team. When a team is clear about its vision and sense of purpose, when it knows why it makes a difference, when it knows that what it does matters, then the other day-to-day challenges become bearable. And in fact, they can become par for the course. So team building tool number 1 is to create a vision and a sense of purpose. Here's team building tool number 2. Set and articulate goals. Now, not only do high-performing teams set and articulate goals, but they do it individually and they do it together. See, individual goals are important, but it's the setting of team goals that really takes these teams from average to exceptional. When teams set goals jointly, they create buy-in. They create commitment. Most of the teams that I have observed have at least 1, often 2, joint team planning sessions a year. And in these sessions, sometimes with the help of a facilitator and sometimes not, they articulate and document their goals for the upcoming period. Now, do not underestimate how powerful this process is. Beyond just the obvious benefit of articulating team objectives, the greater value comes from the buy-in and commitment it creates. See, it's entirely possible for you, if you're the formal leader of the team, to just give your team its goals, probably cascaded down from higher levels in your organization. But to demonstrate how incredibly useful it is to do it jointly, let me tell you the story about Marie. Now, Marie is a little 6-year-old girl, and I want you to imagine that it's opening night at an upscale art gallery. Imagine sequin-clad art collectors nibbling on dainty hors d'oeuvres and sipping wine as they alternately extol the virtues and criticize the lack of vision of the various artists on display. I want you to imagine this event. All in all, a very dignified and sedate event, except for the little 6-year-old girl called Marie, who you couldn't help but notice. She was exquisitely outfitted in a blue satin dress, complete with matching shoes. But let's not forget she was 6 years old, and she was clearly bored with the unchildlike surroundings. Now, like most 6-year-olds at a loss for entertainment, it didn't take her long to create her own. Running from pillar to pillar in the open floor plan of the gallery proved to be great amusement. Well, for her, because the highbrow guest looked askance. A child in the gallery, running around and making all this noise. Oh, my goodness. Now, the father, Marie's father, quickly appeared. Marie, he said, please sit down. Well, Marie complied, but she's 6 years old, so it was only for a couple of minutes. Then she was up, racing around the room again. Her father repeated his request for her to sit down. In fact, as the next 30 minutes wore on, he asked her several times. Each time Marie complied, but then it was just a few minutes later that she was back up again. Finally, in frustration, her father picked her up and physically sat her down in a chair. He said to her, now you stay there and don't move an inch, he ordered. She looked up at him, and with a wide-eyed look, she replied, Daddy, on the outside, I'm sitting down. but on the inside, I'm still running around. Now, it's an innocent response from a child, yet it demonstrates the important difference between compliance and commitment. You see, Marie's father sought commitment, but all he got was compliance. She said, Daddy, on the outside I'm sitting down, but on the inside I'm still running around. Commitment is on the inside. Compliance is on the outside. If you simply create objectives and goals for your team members or cascade them down from higher levels in your organization, you may only get compliance, even though what you seek is commitment. And compliance and commitment look the same on the outside. It's only when a crisis is upon you that you will see the difference. See, when a crisis happens, if all you have is compliance, and if you happen to have the title of supervisor or manager or team leader, you will be on your own. Because everyone else will be gone, it will be your problem. But if you have commitment, then it becomes our problem. And you can often stand on the sidelines and watch while your team will roll up their sleeves and work on solving the problem. Commitment is definitely what you want, but it takes an investment of energy up front to get it. Setting and articulating goals individually, but perhaps more importantly together, because that creates commitment. That's team building tool number 2. Jeff, I'm thinking we're about halfway through our session. This is probably a good time for me to stop and check in and see if we've received any questions that our participants would like me to answer.
We have. Let me look at this. Okay. Isn't synergy heavily tied to the clarity of the project goal?
That's a great question, and the answer is absolutely yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, as you will have seen in the first 2 team building tools that I just gave you, right? Team building tool number 1 was to make sure that you created that vision and sense of purpose. So people have to be clear about what the vision and sense of purpose is. And team building tool number 2 was to set and articulate goals. And the key word there is articulate. Articulate, as in it isn't good enough to just know it in your head. You've got to articulate it. You've got to speak it loud so that others can hear, others can understand, and others can buy in as well.
Perfect. I think this goes back, Merge, to your 8 characteristics of high-performing teams. How do you do number 3 without being considered a non-supporter?
Okay, so number 3, I just want to confirm. Which one was number 3?
I'm hoping you can tell me.
Okay, well, no, I got my notes right here. So number 3 was high-performing teams communicate openly and honestly with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the question? Ask me the question again.
That's interesting then. How do you do number 3 without being considered a non-supporter? So maybe the number is wrong. So maybe this person can send this back in and we'll move on. One more. You said that one of the characteristics of high-performing teams is that the members should feel that they have numerous opportunities for advancement. But
yes,
you're a fairly small lab with a limited number of levels that people can be promoted into. How can I reconcile this inconsistency?
Absolutely. That's a great question, so let me address that. It's not unusual. It's not unusual to have teams that are fairly small or be in organizations where there aren't opportunities for what I call advancement. But let me just clarify the difference between 2 words. There's a word called advancement, and there's also a word called growth. And most often in everyday English, we use the words interchangeably. But I would suggest to you that there's actually a difference. Advancement, to me, suggests promotion, moving from one level to the next job to another job. Growth, however, to me, suggests the opportunity to grow within a job. So, numerous opportunities for advancement, just because there's no opportunities to be promoted does not mean that there are not opportunities to grow within the job. So what I would suggest there is that you listen, no matter what lab you're in, I know this to be true, there's always something going on. There's always some special project that needs to be looked at. There's always some initiative that's been sitting on the back burner because you haven't had time to bring it forward. There's always something that's been niggling at the back of your mind because you know that something needs to be addressed or taken a closer look at. All of those are ways to create opportunities for growth and advancement. So don't restrict yourself. Don't think that this simply means promotions. It actually also means opportunities to grow within the job.
Perfect. I'm going to let you go on. We've got lots of questions pouring in now, so we'll ask
Oh,
those
okay.
at the end.
Good. We'll handle them at the end. Absolutely. Let me then
Okay.
continue. I had promised you 8 tools, so we've only done 2. So let me take you to team building tool number 3. Team building tool number 3 is to create a team charter and a list of acceptable behavior norms. Let me explain what I mean by that. Now, as soon as possible, now this doesn't actually, it doesn't matter whether you are a formal leader of your team or what I refer to as informal leader. An informal leader is one who doesn't have the title of supervisor, manager, or team leader, but nevertheless, every single one of us are leaders in our roles. What I want you to do as a team, as soon as possible or early in your tenure with your team, is to take the time with your team to create a team charter that includes the acceptable norms for behavior. Now, this is something that has to be driven by the members of your team, but your objective is to ensure that the 8 characteristics of high-performing teams make it onto the list. Now, if you happen to be skilled enough as a facilitator to make this happen with your team, all the more power to you, but many of the managers and supervisors I work with choose to bring in a trained facilitator to help them with this. Now, if you happen to work in a large or mid-sized laboratory, then you probably already have such a resource available in your HR department. You just have to ask for it. If you're in a small lab, you may have to go externally to hire someone, but it's worth the investment, and that's really what it is investment. Now, what your goal is to get your team to come up with at least these 8 characteristics I've identified to you earlier on their team charter and behavior norms by themselves. And if you can do that, you are well on your way to having a high-performing team because they already buy into these. You definitely do not want to give these to them. Now, here's the beauty. If your team develops their own charter, in other words, what are we about, and the list of acceptable behavior norms themselves, then something really cool happens. See, what happens is that your team members will start to self-police. When one of your team members begins to stray from an established norm, another person on the team will say something. They'll say, well, hang on a minute, that's not one of our team behavior norms. See, you won't ever have to say anything, and this is particularly important if you do happen to have the title of supervisor or manager. You will discover that when you've taken the time to create a charter and a list of acceptable behavior norms, you can sometimes just sort of sit back and let the team manage themselves. And of course, this is a characteristic of high-performing teams. So that's team building tool number 3. Now, I have gone over this one pretty quickly, and the reason I have is simply because it is an involved process, which is, of course, why I recommend a facilitator, either from your HR department or externally, if you can make it happen. If any of you wanted more information, of course, feel free to email me at the end of this presentation, and I'm happy to try and connect with you and help you set this up for yourself if it's something you'd like to do yourself. Okay, let me now take you on to team building tool number 4. Team building tool number 4 is to put up a team brag board. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's a place to brag. And a team brag board is just a way to create team spirit and cohesiveness. Put up a bulletin board in your teamwork area. If you can't find a bulletin board, then just an empty wall works just as well. Okay? The key is that it needs to be in your teamwork area. It has to be in your area. And what would you put on this board? Photos of the last team event. Thank you notes or emails from internal or external customers. Announcements about an upcoming or past event. Highlights of any sort that relate to the team. The purpose of the board is to create team spirit. So what you are trying to do is make the board a reflection of your team. Now get creative. To start, you could put up a photo of each of your team members with one little unknown, interesting fact about each one of them. Well, it's unknown previously, it's now going to be known, but an interesting fact about each of them. In a few moments, I'm going to talk to you about team building tool number 5, which I'll give you a preview, is to organize fun. Well, take photos of those fun events and post them on this board. Now, I got to say something to you. This may seem like a small or trivial thing to do, but its value is far, far more than you might realize. Something like this, something like a team brag board, creates conversation and camaraderie between team members and will actually help your team gel into one high-performing unit. So put up a team brag board. And like I said, be creative, start it off, get it going. You'll find that your team will take it over and it'll become something that they gravitate toward. Here's team building tool number 5. Now, I told you a few moments ago what that is. It's to organize fun. Then you might ask me, Merge, why does it have to be organized? Won't a high-performing team have fun anyway? Well, perhaps, but you cannot assume that fun will just happen. In fact, if you make that assumption, you're pretty much guaranteed to be wrong. I've always believed that when you assume something, you get into trouble. You can't just assume that fun will happen. You have to consciously and deliberately plan and organize for it. Now, one of the easiest ways to do this is to appoint a rotating fun committee, or what I used to call during my years in industry, the rotating vice president of fun. See, in one of my past supervisory roles, so I actually had the title of supervisor, I managed a large team of 28 employees, and I divided them up into 4 groups. So 7 people per team. Each group was assigned 1 quarter of the year during which it was their responsibility to plan our fund. So I turned it over to them. I said, okay, here's 7 of you. It's your responsibility for this quarter to plan our fund. I gave them a small budget to work with. I realized that not all of you will have that facility, but I certainly did, so I took advantage of it. Let me tell you how small. We're talking $200. $200 a quarter, $200 a quarter, and other than requiring that whatever they planned was legal and respectful, I gave them a couple of rules, but not many, legal and respectful, I let them get at it. They loved it. They held hallway bowling contests, dress up and dress down days, international potluck lunches, Bermuda Shorts Day, guess the baby picture contests. The lists went on and on and on. But perhaps most importantly, having fun in the workplace was a huge motivator and a team builder. And the key to making the fun happen is to plan and organize for it. Don't just wait for a chance to make it happen. Because the truth is sometimes, well, not sometimes, nowadays we're all busy. And unless you force this in there, unless you ensure that fun is being organized, a lot of times it's just going to drop by the wayside. And it's oh so critical to creating a high-performing team. And speaking of that, Jeff, I'm thinking maybe we need to do a polling question.
Perfect. All right, so this one is having fun in the workplace. You need to select one. Having fun in the workplace is a waste of time where you're here to work, not have a party. Number 2 is important, but we can't seem to find the time. Is important, but we just don't have the money. Is important enough, we set aside a small budget and time. So please cast your vote.
And Jeff, while we're waiting for our poll results to come in, I'm excited to hear those results, but while we're waiting for them to come in, let me give you a teaser for what I'm going to be giving you at the end of our webinar. At the end of our webinar today, I'm going to give you a link to a short article titled, Are We Having Fun Yet? And in that article, I've outlined 5 specific things that you can do in your lab to create a workplace that is playful and productive. But I'll give you that at the end of our webinar. Jeff, have our results come in yet?
They have. 100% said it's a waste of time. No, I'm kidding.
No!
Only 4% said it's a waste of time.
Woohoo!
45% said it's important, but we can't seem to find the time. 25% said it's important, we just don't have the money. And 26% said it's important enough, we set aside a small budget and time.
Oh, I'm so heartened by those results. I love that 26% of our audience said that they make the time for it and they set aside a small budget. I got to tell you, for those, the 25% that said it's important but we don't have it enough, just don't have the money, you definitely need to read that article that I'll refer to at the end of this webinar, because it gives you ideas. You don't need a lot of money for this. You can make it happen. And those who said, the 45% said that it's important but we can't seem to find the time, I know you're busy, guys, but I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. You've got to organize it. It's got to be part of your responsibilities, because if you don't will this in, then it's not going to happen. You're not going to have a high-performing team. And, of course, our 4% who said it's a waste of time, I have a feeling I probably couldn't change your mind, so I'm not even going to try. Let's go on to team building tool number 6. Team building tool number 6 is when things go wrong, don't lose your cool. So here's the thing. Whether you like it or not, you are a role model. You are a role model. As an informal leader or a formal leader, you are a role model to team members because team members watch each other. We do that. We all look at each other, and that's how we determine what the norms are for behavior on teams. One of the behaviors you want to consistently demonstrate is how you respond to situations when things go wrong. It's critical that you not lose your cool. Now, unfortunately, here's what I've seen in many dysfunctional organizations. A supervisor or manager says to his employees, "I trust your judgment." And employees, in good faith, believe it. And then, as happens often in real life, things don't go exactly the way as expected. And the supervisor or manager panics and in the crisis moment takes it out, either as anger or frustration, on the poor, hapless employee that made the erroneous decision. So much for "I trust your judgment." Now, the unfortunate outcome of the manager's behavior during this crisis is that employees learn pretty quickly that it's not okay to make decisions and take action, which is definitely not what you want. Remember, one of the 8 key characteristics of high-performing teams is that willingness and authority to solve problems. You want them to make decisions and take timely action. So it's vitally important that you consistently show your team members that it's okay to make decisions and take action. As individuals for sure, but even more importantly as a team. I repeat, do not shoot them down when something goes wrong. Instead, keep your cool in the moment, and shortly after, debrief the situation by holding what we refer to as a postmortem. Now, that is an unfortunate choice of words, but, because postmortems are, a postmortem or a look back can be done formally or informally. Essentially, a postmortem or a look back is an analysis in hindsight of what went wrong, where the process broke down, what you would do differently the next time. And if you do this consistently, your team members will not only learn that it is okay to make decisions and take action, but will also come to value the look back or postmortem process as a way to learn and improve. Here's team building tool number 7. Get to know your team members. Now, whether or not you're in that position of formal leadership or informal leadership, take the time to find out something new about each of your team members' experiences or backgrounds or hobbies or personal interests. Now, there are 2 benefits to tool number 7. First, the more you learn about the people you work with, the more you will learn about what motivates each individual. I'm actually reminded of a story that was told by Mary Kay Ash. If you recognize the name Mary Kay Ash, it's because she's the founder of Mary Kay Cosmetics. Now, before she founded Mary Kay Cosmetics in the early 60s, she worked as a salesperson for, wait for this, Stanley Home Products. And she once won a prize in an internal sales contest. A flounder light, something you're supposed to pin to your hip boots when you fish at night. Now, Mary Kay Ash in her book says, "I was devastated. What a terrible thing to give to any woman." Now, there may be women out there listening who think that's a great gift, but you have to remember, Mary Kay, we're talking the 60s, Mary Kay's a, makeup and beauty queen. She says, "I was devastated. What a terrible thing to give to any woman." And then she goes on to say in her book, "You can tell it was a man who was awarding these prizes." Now, remember, the best way to find out what motivates the people you work with is to get to know them. The second benefit to tool number 7 is that when you take the time to get to know your team members or your coworkers, you develop a relationship with them. And these relationships are what will actually make your team a team. When things go awry in your lab, and they will, by the way, it is the sense of team that will cause everyone to roll up their sleeves and get to finding a resolution to the problem. Last but certainly not least, here is team building tool number 8. Team building tool number 8 is to facilitate lively and informational team meetings. Now, at some point in your career, you have no doubt attended the meeting from hell. Yes, you know the one. The objectives are undefined. The meeting calls on for hours. Personalities clash. Disagreements take over. And progress grinds to a halt. In short, nothing gets accomplished. And perhaps you've attended more than your fair share of the meetings from hell. But the more important question in today's context is, have you chaired or led the meeting from hell? Are you responsible for the meeting from hell? Don't answer. Let me just take this further. You probably have periodic team meetings in your lab. Now, do people at your team meetings describe those meetings as mind-numbing, inefficient, and a waste of energy? Or do they find them useful and productive and a good use of their time? The truth is that meetings don't have to be agonizing and effective. In fact, they can be They can accomplish great things. They can elevate communication. They can generate new ideas. They can further morale. They can establish goals. They can build strong teams, and so much more. So how can you facilitate lively and informational team meetings? Well, I'm actually going to give you a resource for that as well in a few minutes. But just real quickly, I'm going to give you 4 points. First, always issue an agenda. Second, establish 3 key roles for every meeting. Number 3, always take and issue minutes. And number 4, start your meetings promptly. Okay? Always issue an agenda, distributed at least 48 hours in advance of the meeting. Always establish 3 key roles for every meeting, and the 3 key roles are chairperson, timekeeper, and minute taker. Always take and issue minutes. And I know some of you flinch at the thought of taking and issuing minutes. As I mentioned, I'm going to give you a resource in just a few minutes that's going to help you and give you more information about that. And then number 4 was always start your meetings promptly. No matter who is there or not there, start your meetings at the time when you said you would. Think of it this way. It's a powerful gesture of respect to those who chose to respect your time. When you start late, what you're really saying to the people who respected your time is, thanks for respecting me, but guess what? I don't respect you. Plus, you're also teaching others that your time has no value and is meaningless. Now, I know that's not what you meant to teach them, but that's what you're teaching them. When you start your meetings promptly, you will develop a reputation amongst your team as someone who does so, and you will be modeling good leadership behavior. So I talked only briefly about agendas, but Jeff, I'd love to ask a quick polling question about team meeting agendas.
Perfect. So this one is, when it comes to team meetings, please select one of the following. I always distribute one at least 48 hours in advance. I issue an agenda, but it's usually at the last minute. Or no agendas, we figure it out as we go along.
Okay. While we're waiting for our results to come in, I just gave you the 4 specific things to keep in mind when it comes to facilitating lively informational team meetings. Now, I went through them pretty quick, but if you didn't get them all down, I said don't sweat it. The reason I said don't sweat it is because I'm going to give you an access to a learning resource, to a free article that you can download. And I'm just stalling about telling you about it because it's actually going to show up on the next screen. Okay, so before I go to the next screen, though, Jeff, do we have the results of the polling question?
We do. 29% said they always distribute one. 52% say they issue an agenda, usually last minute, and 19% no agenda at all.
Okay, so woohoo to the 29% who always distribute one at least 48 hours in advance. For the rest of you, please, I encourage you to go to the reference that I'm going to talk about on the next slide. I make a case for always issuing an agenda at least 48 hours in advance, and I hope that you will buy into that logic. Okay, so we're almost at the end of our session, and I am thrilled that you chose to join me today for this webcast. I think, Jeff, you said we had over 850 people registered, and that's very exciting. But I got to say to you, true development of your team building skills is more than 60 minutes in a webinar conference. True development of your leadership and team building skills is a process. In fact, the real seminar, the real learning begins when you log off from this webinar and go and put into practice what you have begun to learn here today. So I would be remiss if I did not set you up to continue your learning after today. So you have some choices and some options that I want to make sure I give you. The first is the article I referred to a little bit earlier. It's called, Are We Having Fun Yet? It's an article I wrote just earlier this year, actually, for a magazine in which I write a regular column. And in it, I give you some very specific, in fact, 5 specific ideas as to how to create a positive and productive and playful, yet very work-oriented and productive environment in your lab. So I encourage you to go there and take a look at it. The second article is also one I referred to earlier. This one is called Effective Meetings. This was published quite a few years ago. Actually, this was in 2004, but don't let that turn you away from it. It's just as valid today as it was 8 years ago. Now, you'll notice that both of these have fairly large, long, and complicated URLs. So if you don't want to, manually copy these down and type them in again, here's what I'd ask you to consider. Just if you go to my website, and my website is mergespeaks.com, Merge Speaks, just like the logo at the bottom of your screen.com, and you click on a link called Free Tools that's across the top bar of my page, it will take you to an entire section in my website that contains, well, as the name indicates, free tools. And the section you are looking for are the article archives, the comprehensive article archives. When you go into the article archives, they are sorted by category, and you should be able to find both of those articles pretty easily, either just by skimming and scanning down the articles. I think there's over 70 articles archived over there, or you could just do a search function and find them by title. So that's an easy way to get to them. I also want to encourage you to continue your learning after today beyond just these two articles. What I'd like you to do is to consider signing up for something I write once a month called Merge's Monthly Mega Minutes. Basically, it's short and sweet. It's designed to be read in a minute, but it's mega because I'm hoping you're going to get lots of value out of it. There's no charge for it. This is just part of what I do. It's part of my commitment to continuous learning. If you'd like to sign up for that email newsletter, we promise not to spam you ever. You can certainly do so by going to that link, or there's an easier way to get to it at my website, and I'll tell you about that just in a moment. Let me give you your other option. See, the Mega Minute comes out by email, and one of the challenges we faced is that many organizations have restrictive spam filters which prevent the Mega Minute from getting to you. So for that reason, we've developed 4 more options for you to stay in touch with me and to continue your learning after today. And of course, I hope you'll take me up on these. Your first choice is to subscribe to my blog, Turning Managers into Leaders. If you go to my blog and click on the orange RSS feed button on the top right-hand corner, you'll be subscribed. And then you'll get a notice every time the blog is updated, which is at least twice a week. There's no email involved in this approach, so it's not as restrictive. And of course, you're in the driver's seat controlling this, so it works really well. Your next choice is to join my network on LinkedIn. If any of you are there, please join me on LinkedIn. Through that, I'll keep you in the know on valuable information and new tips on leadership development and workplace communication issues. You can also join me on Facebook. The Turning Managers into Leaders page is on Facebook. Please like me there, and I'll make sure that you continue to receive valuable information about team building and leadership. And then, of course, your last choice is to follow me on Twitter for tweet-sized versions of tips on leadership development, team building, workplace communication. You can either, it's all on there. My name on Twitter is @MergeSpeaks. Now, if all these URLs look too long or complicated, the easiest thing to do is simply go to my website, again, www.mergespeaks.com, and all of these are linked right on the home page. You should find the icons for Facebook and LinkedIn and a link to my blog. You should find the icon for Twitter. You should also find a link to sign up for my email Mega Minute. I hope that you will choose to stay connected with me after today. We've got, I believe, Jeff, we've still got a few more moments for questions, so I'm happy to entertain them now.
You did such a great job. I'm not sure we do have time. So let me do this. I'm going to put you on the spot, but Merge, I know you well enough that I think you'll be okay with possibly answering the questions we do have offline. If we get you their email addresses, all those people who ask questions, Merge will get a chance to answer them. Not right away. She's got a lot of work and a lot of things on her plate, but she will get to you as soon as possible. Merge, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your insights on team building and everything else. I was so wrapped up in this that I forgot to get organized for the end here. So, but as you can
very
see,
flattering, so thank you, Jeff.
As you can see, if you're interested in contacting Merge directly, you can email her as well, merge@mergespeaks.com. And Merge does speak and train and consult, and like all of our presenters, she's available to help your organization with her very niched expertise. Well, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Unity Lab Services, without whom this webinar series wouldn't be possible. Next month, mark your calendars for the first Wednesday of the month for Spreading Contagious Enthusiasm with professional speaker and author Barbara Glanz. Mark your calendars for Wednesday, December the 5th. December already. We're getting into the holidays. Wednesday, December 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And just watch your emails for more details. Again, it's my honor and privilege to be your host, and until next month, this is Jeff Tobe urging you to keep coloring outside the lines.